In the last video, I explained that I wanted you to create two separate files for your train animation, and that we were going to set up two different camera movements or camera techniques in each one. So pick one of those two, it doesn't matter which. And we're going to render this one with Eevee, and then I'll do a separate video for the other file talking about setting up cycles. So let's start by looking at the render tab. Make sure your render engine is set to Eevee. Let's look at a few things. So you can see sampling and render. The samples are 64. This is how many times it samples the scene to kind of get a better idea of what the lighting should be and the shadows and the colors. The more samples, the more information it gathers to give you a better picture. But there will be a point that more samples don't really give you any more information. So by default, it's at 64. So, excuse me, since Eevee's pretty quick, we're not going to change this. But if you had a really big scene, or a really long animation, I should say, you might want to look in changing this, but we won't get into that for now. So by default, let me double check this. You have shadows enabled, so we're going to leave that on. You do not have ray tracing, so we are going to click ray tracing to turn that on, and that will give us a bit better result, more like cycles. And if you want, there's an option for, motion blur. So as an object is moving, it's going to blur that a bit to help create the illusion of movement like you would get with typical film. Okay, so on motion blur, let's move your animation up to a point where there's something moving. So I've got the train. It's moving at this point in the scene. So I'm just going to go render image. And you can notice that the trees are blurred and that the train has a bit of a blur also. The train is blurring because it's moving. The trees are blurring because the camera is moving. Now, if you want to see what this looks like without motion blur, when you're in this render image editor, you see something here on the top right that says slot 1. If we change this to slot 2, and then we can close this, turn off motion blur, hit render image again, and we're in slot 2, so now we're going to have the render of the train without motion blur. And if we go back to slot 1, we can see the image with motion blur. So you can use this as a way to kind of see if you want motion blur or not. And once you decide, you can turn that on or off. Next, we never actually set up a light in this file. So let's go Shift A and go down to light and sun. Now, in your scene somewhere, you're going to see the sun object, and you can't find it. You can select it here in the outliner, and I'm just going to grab that on the Z axis so I can see it. Now, the sun object, the location of it doesn't matter because it's a global light, so it affects everything. So where you put this isn't going to matter a whole lot. What will have an effect on the scene is if I rotate this and you see this line sticking out, that's going to affect the direction of the shadows. So if I want the shadows to be, so the camera, and then you can see the shadows are being cast in a very certain direction. If you need your scene to be a little bit better lit, you can go to the data tab, to the light bulb, and you can increase the strength. For example, here's 2, 3. So you can turn the sunlight up as much or as little as you want. Now, if you're going to see the sky in your scene, we can go back to the world tab, and by default, you have a different option. Let me see what that is real fast. I've messed with this while I was recording. So I think you just have, this is no, color. So the default thing doesn't show in the list. So you're going to have the thing where you can pick a color. and for some reason I can't change that. Well, you should have a little bar that allows you to pick a color. So you pick whatever color style that you want. That doesn't work. Okay, I can do it this way. So this one, bluish color sky, and that will have some reflection on the objects in the scene. And you're not going to have all this other stuff. You're just going to have the color, and you can pick which color you want. Once you have the light the way you want, once you have your sky the color you want, last we'll need to talk about the output settings. So we're going to leave the resolution the same. Make sure you have the correct start and end frame. And let's go to output, and we're going to pick the location that this will go to. So I'm just going to go here, it's slow here. So let's say train project, and I'm just going to make this train animation 1. And while I'm here, I'll make train animation 2. So we're just going to put this one in train animation 1, click accept. And we want this to be as JPEG pictures. And the reason for this, if we do it in pictures and something happens, we can start back where it left off. If you do a video file and I have you render it while once you leave class and then they have to restart computers for an update or something, you would lose all that progress. This way, if something happens, you keep all the progress and you start where you left off. Last, we're going to change, look at image sequence, and we're going to turn off override. So if something happens and you have to start over, if override is on, Blender is going to go to number 1 and write a new file on top of it, and so on. If this is unchecked, Blender will look in the folder. If it sees that you have an image for frames 1, 2, 3, and 4, it will know to start with the next frame in the sequence, so it doesn't redo all the work you've done already. Okay, so one last thing we need to do, not related to rendering, but to our smoke particles. We want to select our smoke particles, go to the particle tab, and we want to bait this if you haven't done so already. So mine says delete bait, so I'll just hit that for now. But if you haven't, hit bait, and that's going to calculate the smoke particles simulation, so that way it is baked into the file or as part of the file. So you can see that I have a timeline going here. So I'm just going to let that run while I talk. So once you have all these things set up, you can then go to render and click render animation. And mine is lagging because I'm baking. Let's see if I can hit escape. There we go. Stop that. So you will go to render and render animation when you're ready, and Blender will start making those files or the images. And when they're finished, I'll have a separate video talking about how to turn those separate images into an actual video file. So I would recommend that you don't start rendering till like the last 5 minutes of class, and then lock your computer and it can run overnight. And that way, when you come back the next day, all of your files should be rendered. Make sure you do save before you start rendering in case something happens. I'm not going to do that like the second. So go ahead and get all that set up. And then once you have this one set up, in the next video, we'll talk about setting up cycles for the other scene.